know you all are very busy, but it will hopefully be helpful to get you started on kind of a very big topic, which is multi-family lending. So just a little bit about myself. I'm Nicole Kittredge. This year, it's crazy to me, but it's my 20th year helping clients step by step through the homeownership journey. And I am passionate about helping people build wealth through homeownership. I'm looking forward to having some opportunities for my children that I didn't have strictly because I bought a home when I was younger. So doesn't matter when you get started, you can potentially have a home, have equity. And I know two people that sold and are living in vans with their families. So having that equity in your home will allow you to live any life you want if you can get that property paid off someday. So a little bit about New American Funding. We are a direct lender, and I often get questions, what's a broker? What's the difference with a bank? And what's the difference with a lender? So we only do mortgages. We do them really well. We underwrite in-house. We send the money, and we are a servicer, which means you pay your mortgage to us after closing. If you are already a homeowner or were in the past, you will be familiar with having your mortgage sold sometimes over and over and over. So I love this company, has the opportunity to service 98% of our loans. So basically, call me with questions after closing. And one of the biggest benefits is the upfront credit approval. That's the only thing I'm going to talk about on this slide. And it can make a difference in getting your offer accepted in this market. I talked to some clients last weekend who recently sold and now they're buyers. And they said because the buyer had an upfront underwriting approval, it was why they took the offer. So you may know that this market is crazy, it's competitive. Anything we can do to put your best foot forward, we want to take advantage of that. I am going to send you these slides, so don't worry about missing any of the links I have in here. I'm happy to share them with you. So this slide has equity with an arrow going up, and homeownership is a great, safe place to invest your money because statistically over time values are going up. If you're taking care of the property and paying the mortgage down, that's what that equity is, that magical delta of cash that can be yours to buy the van and travel the world, which I wouldn't mind doing someday. And one statistic that just blew me away, it's from November of 2023. The average homeowner has 3,709% more wealth than a renter. So I've had friends say to me, why would I buy, Nicole? I can just pay rent every month. But with rent, you're paying, and at the end of the day, you don't own anything. So that's kind of the key, and I think wins the argument, in my opinion. Now, get a smart start. I know when I first back up like 25 years ago, when I was thinking about buying, I was super confused. I didn't even know where to begin. And I didn't start here personally, which is why I talk about this in almost every training I do. Step one is budgeting. And we are in a market where even people that have been homeowners for 20 years are having to go back and reassess their budget because of inflation. Everything costs so much money. So just two tips for you on this slide. When you're budgeting, I'm a very big fan of using your bank's free online banking bill pay to set up automatic payments. If you haven't done this, make sure you do it. Because if you were to get in an accident and not able to send a bill out, if you have automatic payments set up with the minimum, send a few extra dollars, maybe $30 instead of the 25 minimum, so that you never have a late payment and you know your minimum payments are made on time. This will help protect your credit. You can also change the due date on some revolving debts. So for people starting out that have a difficult time budgeting, sometimes I recommend getting a calendar, seeing when you get paid, and if you can, changing the bills to match up when you get paid. So just two quick tips, but if you haven't started budgeting, that's definitely step 0. Step 1, oh, missing a slide there. Step 1, let me just bring this back. Hold, please. Step 1 is getting a pre-approval. Now, when you are getting a pre-approval, what happened to me could happen to you, which is you get a letter and you sent on your way to look at houses. And this can be a problem because I did that. I got a pre-approval. I went out and looked at houses and I had no clear understanding of the numbers. I was honestly pre-approved for far more than I should have ever been buying. So this happens today, not typically with mortgage professionals like myself, but if you know of someone or if this happened to you where you got a second opinion, you went somewhere, got a pre-approval letter and said, hey, you're pre-approved for 500,000, go ahead out and look without understanding the payment and the closing costs, you definitely need a second opinion. Hold one moment. I'm just going to find the presentation with the correct slides here. I did like 10 dry run throughs, everyone, just so you know. Hello, Paula, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so they're just out of order. So let's talk about why a multifamily. You've all heard the term house hacking these days, yes? I can see some of your faces. Okay, so I did house hacking when I first bought my property. I didn't even know it. We basically had roommates. They paid on time every month. And for years, people were wondering if we were ever going to not have roommates. But it was so convenient to getting our finances in order. So with a multifamily, instead of buying a single and renting out a room, you essentially have the opportunity to rent out a full apartment. And as a lender, we can use 75% of your gross rental income to help you qualify, not on every single loan, but on most of them. And where do we get that data? So your realtor is going to hook you up with what is called the MLS, or multiple listing service. And that's basically the hub of all the main listings. It's the most up-to-date data, and it's where all the other sites get their information from. So sometimes it takes a little while to filter out. So you may see information on one site that's old, whereas if you go to the MLS, it's the most up-to-date data. And where this comes in is when you find a property you love and it's actually already sold, but you're looking at a site. So use MLS, and your realtor or the MLS itself will tell you what the market rent is, which is going to be important to doing that budget. The home buying process, I will not go over this in detail. I have a little flyer here, which I can mail out to you or email. I have it in PDF. But step one, we talked about this, is understanding the numbers. And any questions on that, let me know. Some key players in the process. So typically people think, I want to buy a home, I'm going to see the realtor first. The realtors will typically tell you, back up, you need to go get your mortgage pre-approval and understand your numbers. Once you have your pre-approval and your real estate agent, and you know that they work the way you want to. So in this market, we have to work fast. We have to answer nights and weekends. So if you have a realtor, I know some who go to Florida for the winter, probably not going to be super helpful in this market when we don't really have any time to waste if you find a property you love. And a good realtor and mortgage team are going to be able to help refer you out to the other folks on this slide. So your insurance agent, that's just home insurance on the property. Title and escrow, that's actually another way of saying real estate attorney, which Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island are all attorney states. And just some quick info on the home inspection versus the appraisal. So you actually will hire the inspector to go in, out, and around the property, from crawl spaces all the way to the attic. And they'll give you a very thick report that shows how the property is condition-wise. They may recommend you see further experts, which we can help you with as well. Whereas the appraisal is something that is done for us, the bank or the lender. We order the appraisal. Typically, the appraiser is meeting the listing agent, so you don't really have anything to do with that. But what you do is get a copy of the report, and it shows the value. So working with a good realtor, they're going to give you an idea up front when you're making an offer on a property of what comps, they call it, have sold, basically homes that are similar to the multifamily you're interested in, and do they think it's going to appraise at value? I go into this in more length in other presentations, but I want to focus really on multi, and we have some pretty detailed slides coming up. So building your FICO, I can't not cover this briefly, but basically, if you have no credit, the bottom slide says start with secured. If you have not so great credit, talk to me directly. I have experts I can recommend. And there's one tip, annualcreditreport.com. I don't know if any of you have heard of that site. It's a site which you can get your free credit report 3 times a year from each of the major bureaus. So there's Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. So it's a great way to make sure that everything is all set basically on your credit every year. So if you haven't been checking that and you haven't had your credit checked, it's a great free resource for you. And it doesn't count as a credit inquiry because you're requesting it yourself. Now we're getting into a little bit of the mortgage stuff, which is my passion, but I realize it's not for everyone. So if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. If you want to talk after the presentation, I'm happy to help. But let's dive in. So down payment and closing costs. With a multifamily, there are down payment requirements. The most common that we proceed with is FHA on a multi because they allow 3.5% down. On a $500,000 house, $17,500. With conventional, you can proceed with 5% down, okay? $25,000 on a $500,000 house. And there are other costs and reserves as a part of buying a multifamily home. So costs, I kind of summarize that as closing costs, escrows, and prepaid items, which you should receive a detailed breakdown of when you get that pre-approval, as well as reserves. So a reserve is basically money left after closing. It doesn't have to be liquid. You can actually use your retirement account to meet reserves, which is a lifesaver in qualifying for this type of mortgage loan. Because if you think of the reserve requirements as being 3 months or 6 months, 3 months of the payment of $4,200 a month, and I'm going to repeat this again, is $12,600. So if you're like, wow, I need $17,500 for down payment and I need $12,600 for reserves and closing costs and escrows and prepaids are $11,000, that adds up really fast. So if you have that money in retirement, that's a great way to meet what's called the reserve requirement. Just some quick tips on this slide. So savings must be documented. Can't have cash in the mattress. And you can't borrow funds to buy a house. So unsecured assets means like you can't take a credit card advance and use it for down payment. Gifts are certainly acceptable. Gifts are not always allowed to meet certain requirements, whether it's down payment or reserve. So talk with your mortgage professional about what you have for assets in the bank, what you have for retirement, and which one of these down payment programs will fit for your particular scenario. So I'm going to dive in the next slide, focusing a little more on FHA. FHA, as I mentioned, is the most popular because it's been available basically my whole career, 20 years. FHA has always offered 3.5% down on 2, 3, and 4 units, where conventional was a much higher down payment requirement. But some things that come up that not all even realtors and mortgage professionals are aware of. One big thing is called a litmus test or self-sufficiency test. And this is only FHA that requires it, and it's only on 3 and 4 units. So the calculation for this is 75% of the gross rental income for all of the units has to be greater than the total housing payment. And again, this is all my number stuff, which I love calculating out. I realize it can be a little bit boring for a presentation, but let's just assume rent of $1,200, $1,500, and $1,800 for a 3-unit property. That totals $4,500. We take 75% of that, and that is $4,125. That is, if we use the $4,200 a month example, that means that this property is failing the self-sufficiency test. The reason we use 75% of the rental income for all multifamily calculations is because of something called a vacancy factor. At some point, you're going to have tenant turnover and the property would be vacant. And I am not a real estate agent, but I can tell you, I know that many of the states around here are not very landlord friendly. So it's possible to have a crappy tenant that moves in and doesn't pay. That's why those reserves are important. We as a lender and the investors, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, don't want you to be in a position where you don't have any money to pay if you end up having that bad tenant. So with the self-sufficiency test, as prices have risen, it's made it really hard to qualify for FHA 3 and 4 units. So last year, when conventional said, woo, we're going to allow 5% down for multifamily, it was a huge win, and it could have saved many transactions over the past few years that died because of this self-sufficiency rule. That's a mouthful. And just two more tips rather on FHA before I move on from this slide. FHA is strict with property conditions. So I've had realtors that have been in the business 40 years, put my 20 years to shame, and they're like, FHA is really hard. We don't want to take the buyer's FHA loan. And honestly, FHA is a very flexible underwriting type. So for less than perfect credit, they allow lower down payment on a multi. It's a great loan, but they are strict with property conditions. So I have some noted here, but basically any peeling paint anywhere on a shed out back, on a fence out front, on the windowsills, FHA is like, no, has to be fixed before the buyer can proceed. If there's more than 2 steps, they require a handrail. So FHA is very particular about property condition, where conventional is not. So if you're looking to buy a multifamily and you want a fixer-upper and you're okay with some peeling paint around the property, FHA is not going to be a good fit for you. FHA also has property restrictions on max loan amounts. So essentially, when I'm helping clients figure out what they qualify for, if we know they're going FHA, I'm going to put in a calculation. There's actually a website, it's tiny print. Again, I can send this to you, but to see that the income limit, the property limits are matching. So right now in Worcester County for a single family, a buyer can't finance over $498,000. And in the past decade, that's actually gone up pretty incredibly. It was a lot lower. So FHA was hard to get in Worcester County when the limit was only 300,000. So it's nice that for a single, it's up to almost 500, but it increases the number of units you're buying. So I am finding it's easier to proceed FHA. Most properties you're buying, especially as a first-time buyer. Usually you're not buying the $1 million property. If you were, it'd probably be over the limits that FHA has. So last piece I see here, it's a little bit small print and I'm getting older, FHA fees. So FHA is a more expensive loan type. And this is kind of the con to going FHA. FHA charges 1.75% upfront funding fee on every single mortgage loan. That's a lot of money. So it gets rolled on top of the loan so people don't have to come out of pocket with it, but it makes FHA more expensive. Also, FHA charges monthly mortgage insurance for the life of the loan at 3.5% down. With conventional, you may have heard the term PMI and know that PMI goes away at some point in your mortgage loan. Now, the PMI and the MIP is not as big a deal when you're buying your first property because statistically, you'll only stay in the home or the loan 5 to 7 years before you're moving on to a different mortgage. So most likely, if you get FHA, you're not going to stay and keep the loan for the whole 30 years and be paying PMI the whole time, if that makes sense. If you are buying a multifamily, though, you may be thinking, I'd like to keep this as an investment. So conventional would allow you to have the PMI drop off in the future. I'm sure we all can agree that the mortgage rates at 3% the past few years make it a little more painful to buy now. The folks who bought a multifamily at 3%, if they went FHA, they may keep that and keep paying the PMI. But if in a perfect world rates dropped and you could switch to conventional, it'd be nice to be able to get the PMI off in the future. Hopefully you all agree with that. A little bit on conventional. So multifamily conventional rules used to be 20%, 15 to 20, depending upon the investor, Fannie or Freddie, but 20% for a 2-family and 25% for a 3 and 4 unit. Last year, they shocked all of us and said, we'll allow 5% down. Huge positive change. There is still PMI if you're putting less than 20% down. Conventional is easier on property conditions, so they don't have all the peeling paint and the missing handrail requirements, but they do have more reserve requirements. So you need 6 to 12 months reserves, depending upon your credit score and your debt to income ratio, which I'll talk a little bit more about that. But 4,200 at 6 months is 25,200. So that reserve requirement increases pretty dramatically. Again, it can still be retirement. I did want to just mention quickly that there are renovation loans available for multifamilies. So FHA allows them. You may have heard the term FHA 203K. Conventional allows them. They do require more down for a multifamily renovation loan with conventional. So I have 15 to 25% there. It kind of goes back to what the old guidelines were. VA does renovation loan. You have to be a veteran. USDA and Mass Housing all offer them. So if you are feeling really willing to take a risk on your first purchase and want to do not an investment, a renovation primary residence, we do offer those too. It's a whole different animal, and I could talk for 6 more hours about that. But I just at least wanted to mention it. Now, how does the lender qualify you? So I mentioned debt to income ratio. At the bottom, if you can see it there, it's a little cut off by my head, but basically that's our way of doing a budget for you. So a lot of folks are nervous now because we are seeing prices going up and up and up. And you can't help but think, is this bubble going to burst? I was a new loan officer back when it did back in 07 and 08. And it was a very different market. So my first house I bought with a Nina Nay, no income, no asset, no employment. I basically had a heartbeat and a credit score, and they gave me a mortgage. That is not how it is today. Everything is fully documented, and the crappy mortgages that were issued back then don't even exist today. So a lot of the mortgages were 228 ARMs, which means it was fixed for 2 years and then it adjusted. So what happened was the bubble was going up. They were giving mortgages to people that shouldn't have had them, and they were adjustable. So after that 2-year mark, when all of those loans adjusted, foreclosures galore. So we're in a very different market also, because then there was a glut of inventory. We have a huge housing lack across the entire nation. There is not enough housing for the population. That unfortunately means we're going to continue to be in a seller's market. We did see a little bit of change at the end of last year, but there's just the supply and demand is too high. So just a reminder, anything you can do to put your best foot forward, take advantage of the free upfront underwriting to help differentiate yourself from other buyers, because the multifamilies out there are super competitive, especially the closer to Boston you get. They are really expensive, and the competitiveness, like the multiple offers, are definitely happening. Now, pre-approval documentation, I don't want to stress you out with this slide. Most lenders have intuitive systems now that when you fill out the application, it's going to tell you what paperwork you need. We have a really neat drag and drop system. You can come see me here at my Medway office, fax and scan, whatever's easiest for you. But if you have particular questions about your scenario, reach out. The documentation, although it can seem stressful, can be really easy. And if you're ready to take the next step, my recommendation is always a call first to talk about your plans and goals. For some people, I will, before we move forward, recommend they get their budget in order. Or if they're like, I have nothing saved, go back to that savings slide, start in $5,000 increments. I have a quick story for you on budgeting. So at the beginning of my career, I was helping 2 friends get pre-approved. And I saw one of the couple at TJ Maxx over in Milford, and it wasn't the female. And he called me after and he said, after I saw you there, I returned everything I bought. So if you need me on your shoulder, reminding you to stay on track with budgeting because you're just here for the first time wondering, where do I even get started? That's a great way to, it's actually super impressive when you stay focused how much you can really save. And you have to make changes. I mean, I make coffee at home every day now since we bought our house. And in the pandemic, I started buying coffee in the afternoon. When the inflation went up, that habit had to go. If everything looks good with your budget, you can proceed with the pre-approval. And New American Funding actually allows soft credit checks, which is fabulous. Because if you don't have the best credit, we can take a peek at it up front. And either I can give you tips to get it up, I can send you to a credit expert, but you know kind of what you have to do to improve your scores. And if you already have great credit, awesome. It's not a hard inquiry. And we can proceed to underwriting with the soft credit check and the initial application, which is great. Now, a little quote for you: your life does not get better by chance, it gets better by change. So congratulations to all of you for showing up here today, learning a little bit. And my last quote, which I thought was really funny because this is the story of my life: a home is full of love, laughter, and laundry. You won't have to go to the laundromat when you own your own home. Does anyone have any questions that I can help with? Feel free to unmute or throw your hand up. And if not, no problem, reach out to me direct. What I will do is send you all the slides so you have them with the links you can click on. And if you would like a home buyer's guide or that with the little map, the home buying timeline, I can certainly send that to you as well. It looks like we're good to go.
Thanks, Nicole.
You're welcome. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure. Bye.
Bye.